Hey everyone, Michael here. So here I am in Seattle. It is 11:50 p.m. so I am quite tired, but it's my initiative here to start making a lot more content. I feel like I've been in the industry, in the tech industry for so long, and I feel some of these videos can offer a lot of value to people who are starting their web development journey. So this specific video is geared to a demographic of those who are in college, just finishing college, looking to start a career in computer science, web development, even if you're a web designer, or even if you're an end user and you want to equip yourself with the right information so that you can make healthy decisions when hiring or when working with other web developers. Just a few minutes here, or just a few minutes of getting someone who can give you some nuances in the industry can save you hours, or if not thousands of dollars in the long run. So stick around. This is going to be jam-packed with information. I normally would make content a little more organized. I'm waiting for my tripod. As you can see, some things are, lighting is not perfect yet, but hey, it's a working progress. But I would like to make more organized content. This is going to be more of an ADHD stream of where I talk about everything from web development, starting from setting up your web host to creating the right tools for web development, to implementing from the get-go infrastructure that can scale. And that's one of the biggest challenges when starting a company, is creating the infrastructure that you can actually scale. So let's dive right into it. Web hosting. I'll try to make this quick. I would avoid, let me actually make sure I'm online here, and the light behind me might go off, so I'll just have to keep getting up. So web hosting, shared hosting. There's various kinds of web hosting. There's shared hosting, there's VPS, there's dedicated hosting. I'll briefly talk about all of them. Shared hosting, I would avoid like the plague. And that's the thing. Shared hosting, or hosting in general, is generally neglected. It's seen as like, hey, they're all the same. It's not a big deal. And it's true. When you have one or two clients, it's not a big deal. But that's the problem. Once you're already on a host and you already have infrastructure set up, even if it's far from ideal, it's more convenient to keep what you have rather than uproot and start over again. So it's another reason why it's important to do your due diligence from the start. And there's a litany of reasons. I actually talk about them on our site, hexacloudservices.com, why shared hosting is just bad. But here are a few. You're sharing bandwidth with a ton of people. Infrastructure is heavily limited. Server hardware is not very strong, and it's all economical, so they're trying to cram as many people on it. Even you're paying $3, $5 a month, and it sounds too good to be true, because it is. If you get more of a VPS, a virtual private server, you kind of have your own confined space, but you are sharing a physical server with other people, though it's done a lot more intelligently and resources are allocated a lot more effectively. So that is a fair middle ground. Ideally, if you can get a dedicated server, that's amazing, because you have all the control, as opposed to like when you're in a shared host, you have very little control, and the people with the keys, unfortunately, often aren't very good at what they do. So that can be just really frustrating when you need some changes, you need some adjustments, and when it comes to like you message, let's just say your shared host support, I'm not going to give names here, and you need to do like an FTP account, they're quite helpful, they really are. But the second you start engaging with a modicum of complexity, your frustration levels just skyrocket, and it's really unpleasant, especially when others are relying on you like clients. So ideally, a dedicated server, spend time, learn how to set one up, set up WHM cPanel, which I'll talk about in just a moment. But when you're starting out and you don't have a budget for a dedicated server because you don't have 20, 30, 40 clients to help you out with offset some of those licensing costs, VPS is definitely a fair middle ground. And you can get a VPS that can support 8 to 10 hosts, websites, and it's a great place to start. It really is. So now, I'll talk about some of the features that you want to have on your site, and you want to avoid, so when you have 1 or 2 clients, making manual backups once a week, a little grunt work, not too bad. Although you'll come to start hating doing manual backups. But if you can get like cPanel, and comes with some really good features, and it's kind of like your WordPress, where you have all these open source tools and people build really cool plugins and infrastructure on top of cPanel, and it's nicely integrated, and cPanel is a backend that can significantly help you save your, just make your life much easier. Instead of running it on a bare bones web server through AWS, and then we need to upgrade your PHP language, it's just a real headache, as opposed to cPanel, where you can easily start importing libraries and modules and make updates yourself. So yeah, and cPanel comes with stuff like, I'll just run through it. It's on our site, some of the stuff we talk about. Some of the awesome features would be jet backup. We were just talking about backups. So you can program it to run backups once a day, twice a day, once a week, once a month. And it's super cool. So if you ever have any issues, you kind of by mistake lost some files, your client did some, deleted some files, or, who knows, whatever happens, it's like time machine on a Mac computer. You can go back to any point in time and easily just restore your server, or you can download those backups. And so it's also easier for your clients to store backups. They don't need to start wasting all your disk space. And sometimes when they're coming from shared hosts, they have some bad habits where they can make as many backups as they want because they have unlimited cheap hard disk space. But when you're running some pretty expensive SSDs, and also your clients will be happy to know they don't have to worry too much about backups, although you still want to let them know that they're responsible and they should do it once in a while. It backs up by itself every day, and for the most part, it's as good as it gets. So yeah, and that's jet backup. I'm just going to list a few of them. Lightspeed. So instead of running Apache, you can write a Lightspeed server. It's extremely helpful. And again, you have one or two sites you don't necessarily realize because your server can handle that strain. But what you want to do in general as a web developer is you want to set up sites that once there, lights go off. Give me a second. I'm gonna do that every 10 minutes. I hope you're okay with that. So yeah, when you're working with Lightspeed, or in general any caching system, the reason why it's so valuable is because you always want to avoid invoking the PHP parser. It's just a huge strain on the server. So every time someone makes a request, if you need PHP to process the request and send back a server response, that's just a little bit of a strain. And times that by 100 or by 1,000, depending on how many visitors are hitting the server, that can take the server offline pretty quickly, as opposed to caching, where you're running that PHP parser once, it's creating static HTML files, and then those static HTML files are being sent back to the client every time they're requested. You're talking sometimes 10, 100 times more a reduced server strain. So you can have a whole lot more traffic on the site, and it's a lot more pleasant for people to use it. Also, just the response is just much quicker too, which is great. So getting a really good caching server is important, and caching it at a server level with something like Lightspeed is awesome. There are tools like WP Rocket, which I can talk about as well, which I've kind of really started to like. So yeah, that's a feature that can easily come with cPanel WHM. Immunify 360. So that's a protective shield for your cPanel infrastructure, so it can go through all your domains and all your cPanel hosts. It can run regular scans. It does a lot of preventive maintenance. It's got some pretty smart infrastructure to help prevent intruders. It can detect IP addresses that are trying to initiate exploits and block them out. There's a whole lot of features you can set up, and this protects a lot of WordPress installs from getting virus, because if you think about WordPress, it's open sourced and it's predictable, right? And there's also a high population of people using WordPress. 1/3 of the internet apparently uses WordPress. So think of it, if you're a bad actor and you're trying to kind of automate a process and scale up and get as many success stories as possible and hits, what you're going to do is you're going to first write your code in a way that if you know what you're trying to attack, it's a lot easier to create malicious code for it. So unfortunately, WordPress is highly targeted. So, getting really good infrastructure, preventive maintenance from the start can be highly, highly effective. Cloud Linux. So Cloud Linux is an integration. It's kind of this system that runs on top of your WHM, and it allows you to compartmentalize your resources effectively. So you can virtually assign RAM, you can virtually assign, input output per second. And this will allow you to contain each of your hosts. So if one of them goes haywire, one of them gets infected and it's just memory leaking and it's just draining all these resources, it's only confined to that specific place. So this prevents one person from taking everything down, which you certainly want to make sure happen. And these are scalable tools. This allows you to move from 3-4 clients to 100 clients. And what I see people do on shared hosts all the time is that they'll get one shared hosting account and they'll do add-on domains. So they'll have like 50 websites as add-on domains. that is putting you exponentially more vulnerable every single time you do another add-on domain. So unfortunately, WordPress viruses and exploits are quite sophisticated, and they're recursive. So if they crack one website and they get through a backdoor on a cheaply made plugin, they're recursive in the sense that they build up the file chain, they find other WordPress installs, and they infect those too. So why I say you're exponentially more vulnerable is that when you have 30 websites on one file system, one hosting account, so you're doing shared hosting with GoDaddy, and you've got one plan, and then you're able to do like unlimited add-on domains. It sounds like you can host unlimited people, but what you notice very quickly is that eventually one gets virused. I mean, one gets infected, and Murphy's Law certainly happens. What can go wrong will go wrong. And then now you have that every single website you've ever made for your whole company is all infected with this nasty virus. And then you go and you remove one, but all the other ones are infected, and they just reinfect the one you kind of cleaned up. And it's complete chaos. So this is another example of why you want to have these isolated file systems. So everything is contained. And also it's not really professional practice to mix file spaces with various clients. You want to have them in their own confined space. What they do on there should not really affect what another client does on another. So that's pretty, and I want to talk about also setting up Cloudflare. So you can have your own host with whoever, you can set up your own VPS, you can set up your own dedicated server, but what you want is this intermediary called Cloudflare. It acts as a proxy, and it serves tremendous benefits. First of all, performance-wise. So when you actually have your website, you have data coming from your database, your SQL database, assuming you're running WordPress, and then you have your core assets, your CSS files. So the thing about your CSS files, and assuming you've coded it all correctly, and this is all done in isolation, your CSS files are less likely to change throughout your website. So you've got your style sheets, and those style sheets, regardless of what content's being put into your HTML structure, those style sheets will effectively remain the same. And one benefit of using a Cloudflare is that those assets, those style sheets, are going to be served and stored on hundreds of servers throughout the world. So let's just say your server is in California, but you're requesting it from Lebanon, right? Instead of making all that data come from California, it's only going to send you the core stuff that's likely to change, but then all your other style sheets are going to be pulled directly from a server in Lebanon that's owned by Cloudflare. So when you set up a CDN, a content delivery network, I probably should have mentioned that acronym earlier, but when you set up a content delivery network, what it does is it'll actually go through your website as you start making requests and start storing all those cacheable files in their own local servers throughout the world, and only start pulling a fraction of the data from the actual server, and that greatly increases speed and performance. Security as well. It acts as a proxy. It hides a lot of your sensitive information, and it also prevents denial of service attacks. It does a whole lot of stuff. And it's free, which is crazy. So, there's a free service and then there's a paid service, but the free service is powerful and it's unlimited, and you can host every one of your clients, and you can have this dashboard, and you can control all your records from there. So, and if your client wants to set up their own Cloudflare server and they want to get access to their zone editor and their records, that's by all means, that's fine. But this is definitely something you should implement with everyone. So imagine you've got a really good caching server on your end, and you've got a CDN, your performance is going to start going through the roof, and you're going to have some pretty happy clients. Okay, so, I kind of did a whole bit of a rant on web hosting. Let's move a little bit towards web development. So I've kind of had a changing opinion over time on what practices I should use, and it's evolved, but also the industry has evolved too. So my opinions has changed as I've kind of gained experience, but at the same time, it's also been influenced by a very quickly changing environment. Now, I'm going to gear this conversation towards less proprietary structures for those who are just looking for in and out quick jobs, websites, e-commerce pages. Of course, there's the no-code solutions like Shopify, Wix. The problem with those is, and for people on a very limited budget, with limited use cases, it really is an ideal solution. Strangely, I personally didn't think this industry, Squarespace and whatnot, would develop as quickly as it did. I didn't think no code would be that prominent. But, I saw it coming, but it came a little quicker than I anticipated. And in some cases, it's not a bad solution, but you really are at the mercy of these structures' simplicity. Simplicity is a double-edged sword. And when it comes to doing a lot of SEO structure, when it comes to just doing any sort of, sometimes you realize it's not the kind of infrastructure here, I'll put it this way. It's not the kind of infrastructure that you can be confident is going to serve as a foundation for you to build on. Instead, you find yourself in this kind of cycle where you build this infrastructure and then the second you want to kind of have a little bit of upwards mobility and take the next step with this client or with the infrastructure you're building, and you need any sort of customization, instead of you just having a foundation to build on, you find yourself tearing down and rebuilding every time. And that's just, it's not ideal. So as any engineering problem, there's no best solution. There's a best solution for you, and you got to look at your pros and cons. You got to look at your interests in a specific structure. It's like someone asks you what car is best. It's like, do you have like 8 kids and you need a van, or are you a race car driver and you need a race car? That's the kind of question you want to ask yourself. So, some clients, let's just say they're an entrepreneur and they need they need a beautiful website that properly represents who they are, what they do. You want to look for something that you can build on, but at the same time, that should be a pretty quick in and out job. And WordPress serves that perfect medium. And I'll tell you why. Because you do have, although you should avoid using plugins all the time where you can, you have a open source tool. You're not this incredibly good technologies that have already been developed. There is a vibrant community of support. That light again. There's a vibrant community of support, and it's just like you're halfway there every time. So using WordPress is definitely a good place to start. And if you want to create custom themes, you can. And content builders were pretty frustrating to deal with a few years ago, but they've come a long way. And the two kind of kings in the industry were, and everyone will have their own opinion, kind of like, iOS, like iPhone and Android folks, they've got their own reasons for why they like one or the other. It was Elementor, and what's the other one? I'm just a little tired. God damn it. It'll hit me in a second. But I was using the other one for quite a while. The other one, I'm just literally exhausted. But unfortunately, Elementor won. Fortunately, they won, and using Elementor as a builder, as a content builder on top of WordPress can be extremely powerful too, because it does things extremely well and efficiently. And the problem with the other one, I'm gonna have to, give me a second here, I'll tell you why my brain fog is kicking in. Divi builder, Divi. So the problem with Divi is bloat. They're just like RAM guzzlers, and it doesn't scale nicely at all. So that was my problem with Divi. And then Elementor just became highly efficient. It's just really pleasant to use. So I recommend for those starting their web development journey to look into Divi. You can do a lot with it, and you can create custom themes where you want. You can make specific modules, have custom PHP. You can make certain modules, just have templates with Divi. And here's what I do recommend. I recommend you learn how to code, and it gives you also a certain sense of confidence, and it allows you to make adjustments. And here's the thing, in computer science and programming, the solution is like 5% you're 5% there with the solution. It's about getting the most elegant solution. It's about making smart decisions. It's about having sharp problem solving skills. So you're solving things, instead of spending 10 hours solving them, you're spending 30 seconds. I'll give you an example, all right? Recently, we needed to make an adjustment to a plugin, which you generally shouldn't do, but in some cases, you got to go into the plugin's core, or you can just have you can move certain files to your theme, and you can overwrite some core assets without actually changing the plugin itself, whatever it is. Some of these plugins can be a little complicated, and you can spend 4 or 5 hours digging through. Now, let me get that light. It's bothering me. You can spend 4 or 5 hours digging through a plugin till you find that specific code you want to make whatever adjustment to. Or you can spend 30 seconds learning how to use just basic, SSH commands and do a grep command and kind of locate the folder of the plugin and look at the server response. Find any unique pattern of strings. Let's just say it's an ID of a div tag. Throw that in your grep command saying search this entire plugin folder for any pattern matching this div ID or this specific structure that's unique, and then you find exactly where in the file that plugin is the code you want to kind of isolate. And then you can build your stack of tracing, finding exactly what you're looking for from there. But the point is, we're talking difference of 5 hours or 30 seconds. Both are a solution, just one's smart and one's not. So long story for a small point, but yeah, you definitely want to know more so you can make smarter decisions. And making good websites means that you don't necessarily always want to be coding things custom, but you want to know that, and you want to be confident that you can properly go under the hood when you need. So look at WordPress as like an operating system, but you want to know PHP very well. So perhaps give yourself a challenge where you start making custom themes on your own, so you get better PHP skills, and B, you get familiar with WordPress's just infrastructure and how it works, because it's a pretty cool system and you can do a whole lot with it. When you're dealing with heavily proprietary systems, we're talking like really customized niche use cases, WordPress might not be ideal, but for a good 85% of things, WordPress is a beautiful solution, and it allows you to make a lot of money because you can open and close jobs very quickly, and you can, once you're done the job, you can effectively delegate it. WordPress allows you to separate content from structure. That's what's beautiful about it. Your clients now can go into the back end and update the content without having to worry about the structure. It's a content management system, and it does a really good job. Also learning what plugins are good, what plugins are not. Poor plugins are they're candy for hackers because they're backdoors into the system, right? So most exploits from WordPress come directly from poor plugins. Some dude in his basement on the other side of the world decided to throw together a plugin over the weekend, and he's not necessarily doing things correctly or implementing good practices, and before you know it, this guy, some bad actor realizes, oh wow, this plugin's poorly coded and it's running on 100,000 websites. So he just runs a script, rattles your doorknob, just goes through every IP address, looks for a WordPress, and kind of knows what kind of structure it's looking for if you're using this plugin. And then, oh, this person's using this plugin, boom, they're in your site. And before you know it, you've got all sorts of problems. So yeah, and once you get into a site, who knows, you can get into, even as bad as it can get, you can technically, if you're using a plugin for file manager, which people use, and I don't get it, so you can use a plugin that gives you access to your file structure of your WordPress install. And once you have access to WordPress, that's a pretty strong tool to have at your disposal. And so yeah, long story short here, get familiar with your environment, spend a lot of time learning how to code, because it's truly going to help you in the long run. I can put out a list of plugins that I use, and they're really good. SEO is extremely important, so that's one of the plugins I'll talk about really quickly. Yoast was known to be the king of SEO for WordPress. Kind of like Divi, it's been superseded by Rank Math. Rank Math is, in my opinion, Rank Math is superior in every metric for SEO. They do everything from sitemaps to rich schema objects to just predictive. They have like AI functions for meta titles and descriptions, local SEO, I mean, you name it. So getting yourself Rank Math, getting yourself even a pro for unlimited accounts is definitely the way to go. Advanced custom fields is definitely, I'll just open up a website and kind of just run right through some of them. It's getting a little late here, but I've got a few more minutes. Advanced Custom Fields, ACF, great plugin. It allows me to implement custom fields on specific pages or users. Classic editor, I'm a fan of that. I don't mind it's called Gutenberg editor, but classic editor is classic. So it's definitely something I enjoy using. Elementor Pro. Now there's a whole bunch of add-ons for Elementor. I like, Jet Engine's got a few good features I use, so it's definitely something I'm going to give a call out for. Force HTTPS, that's just because sometimes Force HTTPS just make sure that, so if any link on a server response is not HTTPS, your HTTPS handshake will be broken. So this just ensures that all your assets are using HTTPS. Honestly, if you coded it correctly, you shouldn't need this plugin, but it's not a very heavy one, and it's sometimes not too bad to have. I mentioned Jet Engine, Jetrix, Lightspeed Cache. WP Rocket's awesome. So it's really good, really, really good. It's just, you turn that thing on and you're like, whoa. And it does really good stuff. So it even has integration. It even has integration with CDN, so it'll help your Cloudflare do better caching. You can really customize stuff with WP Rocket. Lightspeed's really good too. I have my issues with it, but we can talk about that another time. Rank Math, Sitekit by Google. It was a little heavy at first. I think they've done some pretty good jobs. Pretty good job speeding it up. But Sitekit by Google essentially has there's a whole bunch of basic Google integrations like Search Console and all that good stuff. WooCommerce, if you're transacting. For WooCommerce, for transacting, I tend to like Stripe. It's really good. I used to be a big fan of PayPal, but not so much anymore. They're alright, but Stripe is good. WP Sweep, not a bad plugin. It really helps you optimize your WordPress tables here and there. Definitely recommend. And yeah, those are just a few. WordFence is great too. Yeah, WordFence, definitely. WordFence is a security tool. It can help you detect right away if you have some exploits or if some core WordPress files have been modified. It helps you just replace them right away. That plus Immunify 360 running on the server itself make a really good team. So between those two, you can start tackling problems really quickly. And when your WordPress install does get virus infected, or should it ever, it's not just about deleting those infected files. It's about sometimes removing WordPress viruses can be fairly complex. So you want to have a decent level of experience to be confident you're doing them right. So maybe hire someone who's been doing them for a long time. But yeah, just deleting files is really not always the solution, and they can be really tricky. They can be hiding in RAM. They can be polymorphic, so they can start evading detections pretty well. They could be programmed to recreate one another. So if you don't kill all of them at the same time, they can always rebuild each other. If you've got multiple WordPress installs, they can hide in one install and then come right back to another. And if there's a backdoor open, so if one of those plugins kind of leave they're able to make GET requests to headquarters, and then they can pull any new PHP files in there. You can keep removing the files they're generating, but the backdoor is just always functioning. So yes, it's better to be proactive for these stuff, but when they do happen, and they can happen, you got to be able to act quick and kind of get it taken care of correctly. So we talked a bit about scaling here because some of these things that I'm talking about don't seem so important when you're dealing with one or two clients, but they become exponentially more exposed. Your tiny chinks in your armor become exponentially more exposed as you start adding more and more clients. And the worst thing is now when you've finally gotten those clients and you're starting to grow, and then your whole entire internal system is collapsing. So doing things right from the start will make it really easy, because at some point you realize, okay, here I've ceilinged up with my current infrastructure. Now I need to go back, redo things. And this even when you do things correctly, this is part of the natural cycle. You never want to fall in love with a specific infrastructure. You want to be like a pyromaniac internally, where you could just spend a lot of time doing something a specific way, setting up SOPs, protocols, and it works really well for 30 clients, but then it stops working after 100. And then you got to go in there and redesign your system to manage 100 clients. So even when you're doing things correctly, you still have to kind of have that mindset. And when you're not doing things correctly, it becomes complete chaos. So yeah, and using good tools. We can talk internally really quickly. Freshdesk is a great tool. Notion's a great tool. Notion is an absolutely vital tool for this stuff. Slack is great for communication. I find WhatsApp is good as it's not ideal in any scenario, but it works because it's a happy medium for everyone. So I'm not going to start driving my clients crazy to go on Slack all the time if they're not naturally using it. And some people have iPhones, some people have Android, some people have desktop, right? So WhatsApp is just a fair middle ground because it gives me live communication, allows me to work on a computer because the WhatsApp app is awesome on a computer. It allows me to work on a phone on the go. It allows me to communicate with my internal team really quickly when I need to. It allows me to communicate with clients really quickly when I need to. So it works out perfectly. It's a great tool. We can talk a million hours about hiring, but you want to wake up every morning and look in a mirror and ask yourself, what is exceptionally unique about me? You want to try to be doing that as much as possible. Anything where you can patternize and delegate is where you want to start putting in an SOP, in an instruction guide, in a YouTube video, in a video where you delegate to people below you, or your employees or your workers. And this way you can create this infrastructure, this hierarchy where you're constantly focused on growing and you're not focused on maintaining your current infrastructure. This comes with time and practice. Another thing is, just a little bit of my behavior is I'm always oscillating between 80 and 20. So 80%, at some point, 80% of my time, I'm focused on maintaining the company, getting more clients. 20% of the time, I'm focused on R&D, research and development, where I'll kind of like step out of our service zone and kind of look at the edges and capitalize on them. Say you're a web developer, you can push out into the edges and you say, hey, how can I capitalize on SEO? How can I capitalize on web hosting, right? Instead of, a lot of web developers will say, oh yeah, you can use this web host. You can make your own, right? And you get more control, you can make more revenue, you can start working on residual revenue rather than, static jobs in and out. So yeah, and then it's a bit of a science knowing when to flip, where you're 80% R&D, and that's a heavy time. And then 20%, you're not actually trying to bring in new clients, but you're trying to maintain the ones you have in your current flow of just work. So yeah, this is all a chess game. And with time you become really good at it, but when you're conscious of these things early on, you get you're 10 steps ahead of everyone else. So yeah, if you've got questions, feel free to ask me. And a bit of a rant, but I hope I provided some value to you guys. Have a great day.